Hey guys, tonight we wander into a fog-swept courtyard tucked behind cold stone walls, where robed figures shuffle between bells and prayer, and somewhere in the folds of their habits, a few are hiding owl feathers. Yes, owl feathers. It's the 16th century, you're a junior monk, and while your official duties include chanting, copying, and regretting the porridge, there's one unsanctioned task they definitely don't write down: collecting feathers from birds that prefer the night. You probably won't survive this. To be honest, not because of violence or scandal, but because one wrong feather out of place, and the entire abbey might descend into a lecture about humility that lasts until your bones are dust. Also, there's an angry barn owl in the East Belfry, and she does not care about your devotion to the Benedictine rule. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where everyone's listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink in the candlelight, still shaking off sleep, already regretting the coarse linen sheets and that one straw bit poking you in the ribs all night. The dormitory smells like wax, old wool, and damp shoes that were once sandals. The morning bell has rung. Again, loud enough to shake the frost off your eyelashes. You rise from your cot and reach for your robe, thick, itchy, and never quite dry. But as you dress, your fingers pause, because tucked inside your inner sleeve, exactly where you left it last night, is a single feather. Pale, soft, not quite white, not quite gray, almost silver in the right light. You feel it before you see it, and the moment you do, your stomach tightens not from guilt, but from the quiet thrill of a secret well kept. You're not alone, of course. There are over 40 brothers in this abbey, each with their own chores, their own hidden habits. But only a few, the ones with certain privileges or particular curiosities, know why feathers like this matter, or why they're gathered under cover of darkness. You tuck the feather deeper into your robe and move toward the cloister walk. Outside, the fog clings to the stone like breath. The bells echo across the courtyard, their chimes bending slightly in the mist. You walk with the others in single file, heads bowed, feet nearly silent. No one speaks, not because of rules, but because the cold bites the words out of your throat before they leave your mouth. Your fingers twitch. You keep feeling for the feather, hidden and weightless against your ribs. If the prior catches eye, if anyone catches it, you'll be explaining something that technically doesn't exist, because nowhere in your training, nowhere in the Abbey's rulebook, is there a section on what to do with owl feathers. Yet here you are. In the refectory, breakfast is porridge. Again, possibly the same porridge from last week. You eat quickly, eyes on your bowl, ears on the conversation. 2 tables down, Brother Alwyn and Brother Jodicus whispering about last night's success and nearly slipping on the wet tiles. You know what that means. Another feather. Another secret. After the meal, you head to the scriptorium, a long, narrow hall lined with desks, inkpots, and tired men squinting at Latin phrases and illuminated margins. You take your place, open your book, dip your quill. Your quill. You glance at it, now sturdy, precise, just recently trimmed. The shaft is paler than goose feather, lighter, slightly curved. Owl. Your fingers tighten just slightly. You look around, but no one's watching. You lower your head and begin copying. The ink flows smoothly. The strokes are clean. The feather moves, as if it knows the words already. Historians still argue whether monks in the 1500s commonly used owl feathers for writing, or whether it was an occasional indulgence saved for special script or high ritual. What's clear is that owl quills had a reputation not only for their fine tips, but also their quiet symbolism. Owls were linked to wisdom, to silence, to the mysteries of the night. A fitting companion for a monk, you'd think, except that, officially, They were also considered ill omens in some regions, which makes collecting their feathers a bit delicate. You finish your copying before the hour bell. Your hand cramps slightly, but your script looks good. No smudges today. No ink blobs. As you blow gently across the fresh page, you glance toward the window. The fog hasn't lifted, but somewhere out there, probably in the upper belfry, or the woods beyond the orchardus, another owl. And you'll need another feather soon. Brother Alwyn catches your eye across the room. He nods, just once. You nod back, which, in monk language, is the equivalent of a full secret handshake and a whispered plan. Because tonight, after compline prayers, you're going out, again, to find another feather, for the abbey, for the books, for the secret jars hidden in the apothecary's shelf, and maybe, just a little, for yourself. You shuffle through vespers with the rest of the brothers, eyes half closed, voice low, the chant vibrating in your chest like a warm stone. The candles flicker in the side chapel, throwing long shadows onto walls that have heard more prayers than any of you will ever count. You're supposed to be meditating on humility. Instead, you're wondering whether tonight's owl will be in the cypress grove or the ruined wall near the west garden. After the final bell of compline, the abbey folds into silence. Not just quiet true silence. A dense hush that settles over every stone, every corridor, every cough, carefully stifled beneath a wool sleeve. Monks peel off toward their cells one by one, robes swishing gently like reeds in wind. You follow the current until the moment no one's looking. Then you slip into the side passage behind the herbarium, ducking your head as the low arch threatens to scalp you for being too tall or too eager. Brother Alwyn is already there. Of course he is. He's leaning against the wall like someone who's always just finished doing something interesting. His hands are tucked inside his robe, but his shoulders betray a restlessness he'll never admit. "You brought the lantern?" he whispers. You nod, and produce it from beneath your wrap, a small thing. Iron frame, flickering wick already lit low. He smiles like a man who's about to go berry picking, and definitely not collecting materials that the abbot probably wouldn't approve of. The two of you creep through the cloister, past the fish pond that always smells faintly of wet stone and melancholy, and out through the side gate. The world outside is hushed, damp, and moonlit. The sky stretches wide above you, stars peeking through the shifting cloud cover, and everything smells like moss and chimney smoke. "Which way?" you murmur. Alwyn considers. "East Grove." You grimace. That grove has thorn bushes, a leaning fence, and a very territorial barn cat. But it also has owls. 2 of them, maybe 3 if the rumors are true. The path curves through the orchard, past rows of bare trees silhouetted like skeletal monks in prayer. You remember being here in summer, when the pears were ripe and bees hummed so loud you thought the sky was whispering secrets. Now, in the cold, everything holds still, until a sudden flutter breaks the quiet. Alwyn freezes. You raise the lantern. Just ahead, perched on the half-broken arch of the old wall, is an owl. Large, pale, round-eyed, and perfectly unimpressed by your presence. She blinks once. Then again. You stop breathing. This is the moment. The goal isn't to catch. That would be ridiculous. And unwise. No. The trick is to wait. Watch. Let the owl preen. Stretch. Maybe shed. Sometimes, if you're lucky, they'll drop a feather mid-flight. Sometimes you find one on the stone nearby. You just have to be patient. You set the lantern down, its light catching the edge of the owl's silhouette. Alwyn moves to the right, slowly, scanning the grass. "Found one," he murmurs, holding up something slender and soft, lit pale gold at the edges. You grin. "That's one. For the apothecary's jar." Then you spot another half hidden in the ivy near the wall. You pluck it gently, careful not to bend the quill. It's smaller, finer, tinged slightly brown at the tip. You turn it between your fingers, and it seems to hum in the stillness. Behind you, the owl lets out a soft, eerie screech, not angry, not welcoming either. Just a sound that feels too old for your ears. She lifts off the wall in complete silence. No flap, no warning, just vanishing skyward like smoke. You and Alwyn stand in silence for a moment. Then he chuckles. That's all we'll get tonight. You walk back toward the abbey, feet muffled on the damp grass. Your hands cradle the two feathers like relics, and the cold doesn't bite as much anymore. As you pass the orchard again, Alwyn clears his throat. You ever wonder why they started? You glance over. The feathers, he says. I mean, someone had to be first. Who was the first monk to say, "You know what this basil tonic needs?" Owl. You smirk. Probably the same one who thought fasting for 40 days was a reasonable challenge. He laughs, softly, trying not to wake the sheep. Fair. You return through the side gate, lantern dimmed nearly out. The abbey looms quiet around you, its windows dark, its walls soaked in centuries of secrets. Inside, you part ways with a nod. Back in your cell, you tuck the feather into a small wooden box beneath your cot. There are 3 others inside, each a little different, some soft and gray, one nearly black, another freckled. You don't label them. You don't need to. Historians still argue whether this kind of feather gathering was truly widespread in monastic communities, or simply the eccentric hobby of a few overly poetic scribes. Some documents refer to nocturnal foraging for scriptive implements, while others vaguely mention natural acquisitions. But no records ever quite explain the way your heart lifts when you hold one light, delicate, a gift left behind by a creature that vanishes when seen too clearly. You blow out your candle, pull your blanket up, and sleep with the faint scent of owl still clinging to your fingers. The bells wake you before the sun does, their cold iron clang crawling under your blanket like a draft determined to ruin the last pleasant dream you were having something about fresh bread and someone else doing the laundry. You swing your legs over the side of the cot, the stone floor as unforgiving as ever, and reach for your robe, still slightly damp from yesterday's fog. Your hand brushes the edge of the feather box as you dress. Just a second of contact, but it steadies you, oddly enough. Outside, the abbey yawns itself awake. Monks shuffle past each other with the practiced indifference of men who've been around each other too long. You walk the colonnade with the rest of the novices, head lowered, mouth already forming the words of morning prayer, even before the chapel door swings open. The chant rises and falls, low and slow, slipping into the stone like tea soaking into linen. You mouth the syllables, but your mind is elsewhere, drifting out toward last night's feathers and the owl's uncanny flight. Later, during work period, you're assigned to the laundry bench. Not glamorous, but warm, since it's near the kitchen hearth. You sit beside Brother Udo, who hums tunelessly while wringing out a woolen scapular with the same rhythm he uses for psalms. The steam makes your face sweat and your back ache, but your hands move on their own. Dip, wring, slap, fold. You smell like the East Grove, Udo mutters without looking at you. You freeze mid-ring. What does that smell like? Old ivy and bad ideas. You don't reply. He hums louder. Brother Udo has been here longer than anyone can remember. He's the abbey's unofficial archivist of rumors. He knows who sneaks extra eggs from the pantry, who naps behind the herb shed, and which brothers think silence is optional after midnight. But he never tattles. He just catalogs. You know, he says after a long pause, when I first arrived, the prior swore owls were the devil's familiars. You glance sideways. Then, he continues, a few winters later, he was writing a sermon with a quill that looked suspiciously not goose. You manage not to laugh, just barely. Brother Udo shrugs. We all make compromises. He tosses the scapular onto a nearby stool and rises. Watch the pot. If it boils, it'll spit. And with that, he disappears toward the hallway, leaving you alone with your thoughts and a cauldron of soapy monk socks. You stir the pot absently and watch bubbles rise like tiny prayers escaping one at a time. Historians still argue whether monasteries operated more by rule or by quiet negotiation. Certainly, the rule of Saint Benedict laid out everything from when to speak to how to sleep. But anyone who spent more than 2 days in a real abbey knows the real laws are unwritten, passed eye to eye in hallways, and encoded in chores. Like how no one ever questions Brother Petrus's little vials, or why they sometimes glow faintly when the moon is full. After laundry duty, you return to the scriptorium. A new manuscript waits, a copy of De Natura Animalium, open to the section on nocturnal creatures. You can't help but smile at the coincidence. Or is it? You dip your quill again, trimmed just this morning, and begin copying. Strigidae, the owl, is a bird of the night. It sees what others miss. It hears what others hush. As you write, the feather in your hand feels lighter, more precise, almost too delicate for ink. You wonder if anyone else notices this, or if it's just you and a few others, drawn to this secret like moss to stone. You pause briefly to stretch, glancing up just in time to see Brother Alwyn walk past the open archway with a broom in one hand and something suspiciously feather-shaped tucked into his belt cord. He doesn't see you, but you smile anyway. After the bell rings for midday meal, you eat in silence as usual, the rhythm of spoon to bowl to mouth soothing in its monotony. The stew is probably lentils, or maybe sadness flavored with cabbage. You can't tell anymore. At the far table, Brother Petrus leans over to speak with the prior. You can't hear the words, but you do notice the way Petrus's sleeve shifts slightly, revealing a tiny feather embroidered into the lining. A decoration? A signature? Or just a mistake? The prior, to his credit, says nothing, just nods slowly and returns to his bowl. You finish your meal in record time and slip out before anyone can assign you a new task. Back in your cell, you open the feather box again. 4 now, 1 for each evening you've gone out. You run your fingers lightly across them, half expecting them to hum. They don't, but there's still a kind of presence to them. What do they mean? Are they just tools? Are they symbols? Or are they, like most things in the Abbey, something more than they seem? You don't know yet, but you're starting to suspect that the feathers are only part of the secret, and that someone, somewhere, is waiting for you to ask the next question. You rise early the next day, earlier than you need to, the kind of early that feels accidental at first, until you realize you're already lacing your sandals, already reaching for your robe, already checking your little wooden box before you even light the candle. 4 feathers, still there, still soft, still slightly smug in their silence. You close the lid and slide it back under your cot. The Abbey stirs slowly around you, yawning through its stone walls with the deep breath of an old place trying to remember it's still alive. You move through the morning prayers, half awake, half listening, the chant weaving its way through your ribs like mist curling through trees. When the final amen echoes out, you shuffle toward the kitchen, not for food, but for warmth. Brother Alwyn meets you there. Not planned, not overt. He just happens to be stirring a pot of weak gruel, with the kind of intensity usually reserved for grave sins and collapsing arches. He glances at you, then down at the pot. "Apothecary today," he mutters. You nod. That's how things get arranged. 1 word, half a glance, and a whole afternoon is decided. The apothecary's quarters are tucked behind the herb garden, always warm, and always slightly smoky from whatever Brother Petrus is boiling at any given time. You walk in, and the air hits you with a smell that can only be described as medicinal optimus lavender, vinegar, dried apples, and something very definitely dead. Petrus looks up from his mortar, eyes crinkling like folded parchment. "Ah, more hands," he says, waving you both in. Don't touch the yellow jar. Or the red one. Or the green. Actually, don't touch any jars unless I point. You nod. Alwyn's already glancing around the shelves, eyes scanning labels as if he can read them backward and upside down. You spend the morning slicing dried roots and crushing mint leaves into paste. It's boring, in the best possible way. Petrus mutters to himself in Latin, occasionally correcting your technique, more often talking to a small potted fern that seems to be thriving out of pure fear. And then, when the bell for sext prayers rings, Petrus finally pulls out the jar. Not a big jar, just a little one, tucked behind a curtain of dried chamomile. Inside, feathers. Owl, clearly. Some trimmed, some curled slightly with age, all resting like ancient petals in a bed of cloth. You glance at Alwyn. He doesn't blink. Petrus lifts the jar as if it contains incense. These, he says quietly, are for tinctures. The down softens the spirits, and the shaft, when soaked in vinegar and lavender, pulls heat from the body. He says it like it's obvious, like owl feathers are just another ingredient, like parsley. You blink. It cures fevers? He shrugs. Some. Or it doesn't. But it makes the patient feel clever. And that helps. You and Alwyn glance at each other again. There's something else here, something unsaid. Petrus replaces the lid and slides the jar back behind the chamomile. Of course, he adds, we don't speak of it much. Some don't understand the subtleties of natural theology. That's code. Monastery code. What it means is, the prior knows, but he doesn't want to know that he knows. It means, do what you need, but don't make him say it out loud. Petrus turns back to his mortar and begins grinding again. You can go now. Just don't tell Brother Hugo what I keep behind the chamomile. He once tried to steep dried beetles in wine and claimed it cured stuttering. You leave the apothecary with the smell of mint still clinging to your sleeves, and the image of that feather jar burned into the back of your mind. That afternoon, you return to the scriptorium, and suddenly you notice something you'd missed before. Other quills, not just goose. One monk, 2 desks over, is using a shaft, distinctly too narrow, too curved. Another has trimmed his to a delicate point and wrapped the base with red thread. You wonder if it's decoration. Or code. Historians still argue whether monks in the 16th century truly experimented with alternative materials for quills, or if these feather variants were rare, ceremonial, or symbolic. The reality is likely a tangled mixum practical, some sacred, some, like Brother Petrus's tinctures, deeply personal. But one thing is clear. Owl feathers weren't just for writing. They were part of a quiet culture of layered meanings, half-beliefs, and whispered remedies. After copying for 2 hours, your hand begins to ache. You flex your fingers, glance at the page flawless. No smears, no blotches. The owl feather quill hums with precision. It feels like it wants to be useful. Like it's waiting for you to write something important. You don't. You copy another line from Deuteronomy. Later, after supper, you slip back to your cell, open the wooden box again, and run your fingers across the feathers. One of them has curled slightly since yesterday. Another still smells faintly of ivy and dust. You lie back on your cot, staring at the ceiling, and wonder, was this what Brother Petrus did when he was your age? Did he gather feathers? Did he tuck them away? Did he have someone like Alwyn? Probably. You close your eyes and listen to the soft, settling sounds of the abbeywood groaning, wind tapping at the shutters, the occasional snort from someone who's already deep into their dreams. You whisper a promise into the dark. You'll go out again. Tomorrow night, maybe. Because now you understand. It's not about the feathers. Not really. It's about what they let you do. Quietly, secretly, softly. The week turns quietly, as most weeks do in a monastery. The bells continue their relentless tolling. The prayers roll on like gentle waves against old stone, and the porridge never tastes better. You move through your daily duties with a calm steadiness, aware now of small things you'd missed before, the way Brother Matthew's quill has a slight golden sheen, the way feathers sometimes vanish from the scriptorium desk drawer without explanation, and how, once, just once, you saw the prior tap his palm against his chest and produce a single owl feather before tucking it into his sleeve like a bookmark in his own skin. On the fourth day after the apothecary's revelation, you're assigned to sweep the library. You don't protest. The Abbey's library is a place of hushed magnificence. Not grand exactly, but sacred in its own right, rows of heavy volumes, the faint scent of leather and old glue, and a draft that always seems to come from the north wall, even though there are no windows there. You take your broom in hand and begin with the usual rhythm. Soft swish, swish against the floor, a polite tap under the benches, a reverent brush around the manuscripts, as if the dust might be holding its breath. And then, as you sweep past the history shelves, your broom catches something. It's small, light, almost floating. A feather. Not goose, not chicken. Owl. You crouch, gently pinch it from the edge of the stone, and examine it. Pale, with tiny speckles, the kind of feather that should not be inside. Not unless it was carried in deliberately. You glance up. The shelves above you hold bestiaries, copies of Physiologus, commentaries on Pliny, and one book you've never opened, a thick leather-bound volume, its clasp wrapped in waxed thread rather than the usual iron hook. You set down your broom, climb. It's not far, just a few stones, a bit of balance, a brief moment of monkish rebellion. You pull the book down carefully, lay it flat on the bench, and unloop the thread. The cover creaks like old knees. Inside, ink illustrations of animals, beautifully done lions with wavy manes, snakes curling into Celtic knots, deer with halos. You flip to the section on birds. There it is. Strix alba, the barn owl. A full-page drawing, labeled in Latin and German, inked in precise lines, with tiny notes in the margin. The margin is the key. You trace a finger along the edge. There, between lines of Latin, someone has scribbled in smaller script, nearly invisible. Best plucked before dawn, when the air is most still. Do not chase. Wait. Another note. 3 feathers for clarity of thought. 7 if you seek visions. You blink. Read it again. Then, something shifts. Literally. The page ahead is thicker than the others. You separate it carefully. It's not 2 pages glued together, it's 1 page with a slit, like a secret pocket. And inside that pocket, another feather. Small, dusty, but perfectly preserved. You sit back slowly, heart thudding in that calm, monastic way that still counts as excitement. You don't take the feather. You leave it there. You reseal the page and return the book to its place, sweeping again as if nothing happened. But now your movements feel different. You're not just clearing dust. You're clearing layers of forgetting. Historians still argue whether monks in the 16th century embedded magical practices into their natural studies. Some claim these notes were simply metaphor, visions, meaning dreams, clarity meaning a good night's sleep. Others suggest that in a world where literacy, science, and spirit blurred often, these margins were where forbidden thoughts lived safely. After Vespers that evening, you find Brother Alwyn in the cloister garden, bent over a herb bed. He's pretending to weed, which is monk speak for waiting to talk. You join him. Say nothing at first. Then, found something in the library. He doesn't look up. Did it bite? Almost. He smiles. Was it in the bestiary? You nod. Left margin. You glance sideways. You've seen it. He plucks a weed and holds it up like a trophy. You're not the first, you know. You sit beside him on the cold edge of the stone trough. Why the secrecy? He shrugs. Not everyone likes questions without answers. The wind lifts a curl of smoke from a nearby chimney. Somewhere in the fields, an owl calls. Soft, lonely. Do they work, you ask? Alwyn looks at you then, really looks. Depends what you think they're for. You don't press. You both rise when the bell tolls again. Another hour, another hymn. That night, before bed, you open your feather box and lay your 4 side by side. Each from a different night, each with its own curve, its own whisper. And then, without knowing why, you pull out a scrap of parchment and begin writing not scripture, not copied commentary. Just thoughts. You write about the owl. About waiting in the grove. About the way your fingers shook when you plucked the feather from the ivy. You write about the apothecary and the glowing jars, and the note in the margin that spoke of visions. You don't sign it. You don't need to. You fold the parchment once and slip it underneath the feathers, because some things aren't meant for books. They're meant for boxes. You wake to rain. Not a storm. Not a drizzle, just that steady, determined sort of rain that seems to seep sideways and settle deep into the fabric of your robe before you've even finished tying the belt. The Abbey sounds different on days like this. Softer, somehow. Every footstep muted, every door creak deeper. Even the bells ring heavier, as if they too are drenched. You pull your hood low and trudge toward the scriptorium, quill case tucked under your sleeve. On the way, you pass Brother Petrus balancing a bundle of damp herbs like a bouquet of drowned weeds. He nods at you but doesn't stop. His boots squelch as he disappears down the hall. You get the distinct sense he's up to something that smells like boiled moss and ambition. The scriptorium is warm, at least, and candlelit against the gray. Your desk smells faintly of beeswax and parchment. You sit, unroll your scroll, and reach into your case. But your fingers pause, because alongside your quill your usual owl feather one, trimmed just last week is something else, something soft, a single feather you didn't put there. You pull it free. It's small, mottled brown and ivory. A tail feather, perhaps, tucked neatly between your ink knife and blotter. You look around. No one's watching. But your chest buzzes like a struck bell. A message. You slip it into your sleeve and begin your copying as usual, though your fingers feel distracted and your letters lean slightly to the left. By the 3rd paragraph, you've decided someone knows what you've been doing, and not just knows but approves, or encourages, or maybe invites. You work quickly and finish early. You leave the scriptorium just before midday meal and walk the long way around to the apothecary's annex. Brother Petrus is inside, of course, bent over something steaming and suspiciously violet. He doesn't look up. "Did you leave this?" you ask, holding up the feather. "No," he says. "But if I had, I wouldn't admit it." You raise an eyebrow. He waves a hand, vaguely. "Not my handwriting, anyway. But it's a sign. Probably. A sign of what?" He finally looks up. Initiation, maybe. Or just mischief. In monasteries, those are often the same thing. He returns to his concoction, muttering something about hawthorn and vinegar. You back away, letting the feather rest inside your sleeve again. It feels warmer now. Or maybe your pulse is just louder than usual. Later, after the meal and the obligatory afternoon hymn that no one really hits the right pitch for, you slip outside. The rain has lightened to a mist, and the garden paths glisten like dragonfly wings. You walk the edge of the cloister until you reach the old cloister well the one sealed decades ago, overgrown now with moss and climbing ivy. And there, on the stone rim, is another feather. This one's tied with twine, not elaborate. Just a basic knot, the kind used to secure dried herbs or close a pouch. You look around. Still no one. You pick it up. Beneath it, just barely tucked into a crack in the stone, is a scrap of parchment, not folded, just wedged there, damp at the edges, but still legible. 3 words. Try the cellar. You feel that buzz again. Not fear. Not excitement either. It's something quieter, like being pulled forward by a thread too fine to see. That night, you wait. You go through compline, you whisper the final prayers, you pretend to sleep. And then, when the dormitory stills and the last cough fades into silence, you rise. Down the hall, past the refectory, past the kitchen, where a single ember glows in the hearth. You reach the heavy door to the cellar staircase. It's always locked. Or, at least, usually locked. Tonight, the latch slides open with barely a protest. You descend. The air smells like wine and stone, and something ancient, not dust, not mold, but a kind of patient waiting. At the base of the stairs is the storeroom. Shelves of cheese rounds, bins of root vegetables, the occasional suspicious barrel labeled, "Do not open," in Latin. You move quietly, lantern held low. And then, behind the shelf of dried legumes, you find a second door, wooden, small, worn smooth around the handle. You hesitate, then open it. The space beyond is barely a room, more like an alcove, a table, a chair, a single candle stub, and pinned to the back wall, on a board made of salvaged oak, is a collection. Feathers, dozens, organized by size, color, texture. Some labeled, some pinned into circles, others bound in groups. There's even a tiny book open on the table, half filled with neat ink notes. You step inside slowly. It's a study, a sanctuary, and someone built it. Historians still debate the presence of private studies within monastic communities. Officially, every thought was meant to be shared, every space communal. But journals surface, hidden marginalia. Rooms like this rumored, whispered about, rarely confirmed. Spaces where monks explored the blurred line between devotion, curiosity, and the quiet need to understand the world in ways the rule never quite forbade, but never entirely welcomed either. You don't take anything. You don't move anything. You just stand there, the candlelight trembling slightly in your hand, and feel a truth settle over you like ash. You're not the first, and you won't be the last. The next morning, everything looks ordinary. The sun cracks through the high chapel windows. The bells sound a little less hungover. Even the porridge is less gray than usual, which feels suspicious. But nothing in the abbey says what happened last night. No whisper follows you through the halls. No sideways glance from Brother Alwyn. No mysterious feather in your quill case. Just a quiet day that seems determined to pretend it isn't carrying a secret. You walk the garden path toward the stables, assigned to muck duty, a task you take with a noble grimace, a wheelbarrow, a pitchfork, the scent of wet straw and monkly regrets. You work silently, scooping and dumping, lost in the rhythm of it all. It's amazing what becomes meditative when you're sleep-deprived and thinking about a feather library hidden under barrels of turnips. You pause only when a shadow breaks your routine. Brother Jodocus, leaning on the fence, arms crossed, a faint smirk creasing his weather-worn face. He watches you for a moment. "Did you find it?" he says softly. You stare at him. Not quite a threat, not quite friendly either. He gestures lazily with one hand. The cellar. You consider lying. You consider laughing. But he already knows. "I did," you say. He nods. "Thought so." You return to your work, pretending this is normal, pretending that monks frequently reference off-limits areas as if they're tea cupboards. After a moment, he says, "You're the third one this year." You glance over. "That many?" He chuckles. "There used to be more, before the prior tightened the locks." You lean against your pitchfork. "Who made it?" He shrugs. "Depends who you ask. Some say Brother Tancred back in the 1480s. Others say it's older, that it started as a record of all the feathers used in copying sacred texts." You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs again. "Maybe it was just one bored monk with a lot of ink and too many curious birds." He walks off after that, as monks do, leaving just enough mystery behind to keep your thoughts spinning. Later that day, in the scriptorium, you open your drawer and find a sliver of parchment. One line, "Bring one tonight." That's it. No name, no seal. But it's tucked under your blotter like a dare. You spend the rest of the afternoon trying to decide which one. Back in your cell, you open the box. 4 feathers, each tied to a night, a moment, a silence that felt meaningful. You choose the first, the pale one from the ivy near the wall. It's not the rarest, not the softest, but it's the one that started everything. You wrap it carefully in a bit of cloth and tuck it into your sleeve. That night, you return to the cellar. The door is unlocked again. Inside, the candle stub is replaced with a full taper. The air smells faintly of beeswax and mint. On the table, a blank ledger, a quill, and a small card, handwritten, "Record your offering." You unwrap the feather slowly, lay it in the open drawer marked "New Editions," and then sit at the table. The ledger's first page is older than old yellowed parchment, ink faded, corners frayed like mouse-eaten cloth. Each line is dated, each feather logged. Name, usually an alias, feather description, where found, and what it was used for. You recognize a few notes. Pale edge feather, chapel roof, used to draft sermon on patience. Barred tip, found by candle rack. Ground for Petrus's calming tincture. Failed. Added lemon balm instead. Unmarked. Discovered in dormitory rafters. Dream journal began next day. You write your own. Gray, dappled, east wall ivy, first collected. Copied Deuteronomy. Dreams increased. You don't sign it. You don't have to. The act of writing is enough. Historians still argue whether monastic feather archives ever existed. Most deny it too impractical, too whimsical, too close to superstition. But others suggest it was part of a broader contemplative tradition, blending natural observation, spiritual reflection, and quiet rebellion. Spaces where monks could catalog more than books, where they could catalog themselves. You sit a moment longer, hand resting lightly on the page, ink drying under your fingertips. Then you rise, and as you turn to go, you notice something in the far corner. Something you missed before. A small box, identical to yours, closed, tied with a red cord. Someone else's feathers. You smile. You leave the cellar, this time slower, not out of caution, but reverence. When you step outside, the stars are out, brighter than usual, bolder, like they too have been holding something in. The night feels fuller, like something small has been shared, and now the world is exhaling. The next morning, the abbey carries on, as if nothing unusual has happened. The bells toll at their usual hour. Porridge appears with its usual mystery ingredients, and Brother Hugo, as always, starts snoring halfway through the second psalm. Everything is mundanely perfect except for the barred feather tucked snugly inside your sleeve. You found it just after lauds, nestled in the wet thatch beside the south cloister wall. No owl has roosted there in months, or so they say, but there it was, damp but pristine, almost waiting for you. You didn't hesitate. You took it. You didn't even need to think. Unlike the others, this one doesn't go into your little wooden box. You keep it close, wrapped in cloth, its weightless presence against your wrist reminding you all day that you're not just a boy in a robe with ink-stained fingers. You're part of something now, something feathered and quiet and passed down through nods and glances instead of sermons. In the scriptorium, you go through the motions. Dip the quill, pull it along the page, make the letters march in neat lines. But the rhythm feels off today. Your hand isn't clumsy, just impatient. You pause often. You shift in your seat. You glance up when no one is looking, just in time to catch Brother Alwyn drifting past your desk. He doesn't stop, doesn't smile, just drops 4 words in passing, low enough for only you to hear, "Tonight, bring that one." That night, you don't go to the cellar. You don't need to. You already sense this evening will be different. After Compline, after the last bell fades into the stone, you slip from your cell and head through the chapel's side door. Outside, the sky is moonless. No stars. Just a dark stillness pressing in on all sides like damp wool. You walk the narrow path along the herb garden wall until you reach the apothecary's shed. Its shutter glows faintly. Candlelight. Inside, Brother Alwyn waits by the work table. Brother Petrus is there too, elbows deep in something that smells sharply of sage and pine resin. And beside him, wrapped in a dark cloak, is someone else hooded, silent. You step into the glow, heart steady, feather in hand. No one speaks. You place your offering gently on the cloth that Petrus has unrolled. He examines it without comment, turning it once, testing the spine between two fingers. Balanced, he murmurs. Ideal for stylus work. The hooded figure finally moves. Her voice is low, precise, or for absorbing residue. You turn slightly and realize it's Sister Benedicta from the convent downriver. She's been to the abbey before, but only briefly, and never like this. She touches the feather's edge with one gloved finger. Feathers are memory, she says. They hold the wind, the sound, the moment they were lost. They carry things we don't name. You nod, though you don't fully understand. Not yet. Petrus adds a few drops of oil to the feather, wraps it in linen, and ties it with a strand of red thread. You'll get it back when it's done, he says, slipping it into a carved wooden tray beside others, some pale, some dark, one still faintly iridescent. As you step back, you feel something strange. Lighter, yes, but also fuller, like you've handed over more than just a feather. Like you've given up a small piece of a secret you didn't know you were keeping. Historians still argue whether monks truly believed feathers could store memory or intention, or whether such talk was poetic metaphor smuggled into the margins of practical work. The line between devotion and quiet superstition has always been thin in places like this. But when you walk back toward your cell, past shadowed arches and rain-slicked stones, you feel it, the sense that something real just passed between hands and candlelight. You return to your room, unlace your robe, and stretch out on the cot. No feather in your sleeve now, no weight in your hand, just the quiet thrill of having been invited one step deeper. Into what? You still don't know. But the air smells faintly of sage, and your fingertips tingle like they've been touched by more than oil. You lie awake longer than usual, listening to the wind press against the abbey walls, and wonder, how many other monks once lay in this bed, wondering the same thing? The following day begins, as all days do, with cold stone beneath your feet, and the first bell ringing like a wet spoon against your forehead. But beneath the sameness, something's shifted. You move through the morning rituals with quiet purpose washing, praying, eating the usual suspect porridge, yet your thoughts are not tethered to the routine. They're with the feather, the linen wrap, the red thread. You wonder what happens next, what it means when a monk gives something to the night and waits for it to return. Your first duty is in the library. You volunteer without being asked, which immediately raises one eyebrow from the steward and no questions from anyone else. Dusting manuscripts is tedious but rewarding. You get to be alone. You get to read between sweeps. And sometimes, the books answer in ways no person dares to. You take the feather ledger with you. Not out in the open. Of course, it's tucked inside your robe, pressed against your side like a heartbeat. In the corner of the library, far from the scriptorium, you open it slowly on the broad oak desk. Its parchment pages crackle just enough to feel important. You flip past your own entry, past Alwyn's, yes. It's there, and find one you missed before. It's dated 1524. The writing is spidery, uncertain. It reads, "Taken during thunder. Westfield. Feather burned black at the tip. Used in exorcism." You stare at the line for a long time, unsure if it's a joke, a parable, or a warning. But the ink is real, the entry is old, and someone took the time to record it in this hidden book that no one claims to know about. Back in the scriptorium later, you notice a shift in how others are writing. Brother Jadakis has tied a tiny silver bell to the end of his quill, not a useful thing more, like a signal. Petrus's quill, meanwhile, has been notched at the base, a cut so deliberate it must mean something. You glance at your neighbor's ink pot and find a feather tucked into the lid like a forgotten bookmark. Maybe it is a bookmark, maybe it's not. That evening, your instructions come without words. A folded scrap beneath your bowl at supper. Inside, a drawing of the chapel door, the one that's always locked, with a single feather drawn across it, broad, barred, and unmistakably owl. You wait. You clean your bowl. You pretend nothing happened. Then, after compline, you walk the long path around the dormitory, avoiding the usual side doors. At the base of the chapel, you find it unlocked for the first time you can remember. Inside, the air is thick with incense and old stone. The candlelight flickers low and amber against the altar, casting soft halos on every wooden beam. There's a figure standing at the lectern. Not cloaked, not shadowed, just ordinary. It's the prior. He looks up and nods. And somehow, that's more surprising than if it had been the ghost of St. Jerome himself. He doesn't speak, just gestures to the small table beside him. A feather lies on it. Yours. Unwrapped. Thread gone. You approach, unsure whether to bow or speak or vanish into smoke. You'll need this, he says simply, his voice echoing slightly in the empty chapel. For your next copy, you take the feather. It feels the same, and yet not. It's smoother, firmer at the base. The color seems sharper now. There's a faint scent of pine and wax. Some tools, the prior continues, are meant to find their owners slowly. You nod, unsure what else to do. You want to ask him if he always knew. If he was one of them. If this whole time, while you scrambled through gardens and cellars, he watched silently, smiling behind his sleeves. But you don't ask. You already know the answer. Historians still debate whether abbots and priors participated in the quieter subcultures of monastic life, those layers built not from rebellion, but from deeper traditions passed down by nods and instincts. The public face of discipline often coexisted with a private reverence for small, strange practices that didn't fit neatly into scripture or song. Some abbeys denied such things ever happened. Others, like yours, never wrote them down at all. You walk out of the chapel lighter, feather in hand, and the sense that you are now being trusted with more than just ink. You are being trusted with silence, with pattern, with a kind of truth that breathes at the edges of the rule, never directly forbidden, but never entirely allowed. And that might be the most monastic thing of all. The next morning begins with sun actual, undeniable sun streaming through the refectory windows like it owns the place. You squint into your bowl of porridge and realize that, for once, the gruel has taken on a shade that resembles something edible. Someone even added a dash of honey. It feels like the abbey is trying to pretend that nothing weird has happened, that there are no secret feather exchanges, no cellar archives, no silent approval from the prior himself. But the weight in your robe pocket says otherwise. You walk to the scriptorium with the feather tucked inside a folded cloth. Not hidden this time, just carried, carefully, the way someone carries a new blade or an old truth. When you reach your desk, you unwrap it slowly, lay it flat beside your inkpot, and take a breath. The quill knife slides easily across the shaft, trimming it to the precise angle you were taught when you first arrived, though back then you practiced only on goose feathers and butchered your first 3 attempts. This one behaves differently. It's firm, steady, just flexible enough to glide when coaxed. You test the edge against the page and find it almost too smooth. Your task today is a prayer scroll, a long one. Latin, neat spacing, ornamental capitals. Normally it would be dull, but now, With this feather in your hand, the letters feel differentless, like you're copying, and more like you're uncovering something that was always there beneath the parchment, waiting to be revealed. Each line flows better than the last. No smudging, no ink puddles. You don't even stop to stretch your fingers. It's as if the quill knows where to go before you guide it. Brother Alwyn passes once, humming under his breath, a tune that's probably not from the Psalter. You catch a glance of his quill as he moves past. It's not owl. It's starling smaller, striped, wrapped in a thread of green. You realize with a jolt, the colors of the thread must mean something. Red for first offering, green for a completed use. You make a mental note to watch more carefully. After copying for hours, you take the finished scroll to Brother Hugo for inspection. He barely grunts approval, but he doesn't correct a single letter. That's a first. As you walk back, you find Brother Petrus standing by the herb garden gate, arms crossed, sun hitting the crown of his tonsure, just right, so he looks like a half-baked halo. He doesn't call you over, but you stop anyway. How did it feel? He asks, eyes still on the plants. You don't need to ask what he means. Like it belonged in my hand, you say. He nods. Some do. There's a pause. You'll be asked to help soon, he says. We've been needing someone steady. You don't ask what for. You just nod and keep walking. That evening, while scraping wax strips from the altar cloths, you find another sign. Tucked beneath the altar rail is a slip of parchment, folded into a tight triangle. You slip it into your sleeve and wait until nightfall to open it. Back in your cell, by the faint light of your stubby candle, you unfold the paper. Inside, a drawing of a bird. Not an owl this time. A crow. Bold lines, wide wings. Beneath it, 3 words. West Wall tonight. The West Wall. You haven't gone there in weeks. It borders the outer orchard, just before the wild ground begins. A place where the Abbey's walls loosen their grip and nature begins to take back control. The ground there is uneven, the stones worn with moss, and the trees feel closer, like they're listening. After Compline, you make your way in the dark, careful not to crunch gravel underfoot. The moon is thin, the stars quiet. The wind smells like cedar and earth. You wait by the wall for a long time. Nothing happens. Then just before you think to leave, you hear it. A rustle. Low and steady. A flutter of wings. A shape lands on the top of the wall black. Sleek. And watching. A crow. Not afraid. Not interested. Just there. It hops once. And then, unbelievably, it drops something. A feather. Straight down. You catch it before it hits the grass. It's long, dark, and warm from the bird's body. You hold it like a lit candle. The crow caws once and vanishes into the trees. You stand there, heart thudding, breath caught between disbelief and reverence. Because this wasn't a plucked feather, this was given. Historians still argue whether monks had relationships with the animals that lingered around monastery as if birds were trained, or simply became familiar over years of patient silence. Some records describe ravens that followed brothers through their morning walks. Others mention owls that returned to the same eaves year after year, watching but never intruding. But none of them mention crows that offer gifts. You bring the feather back in silence, wrap it, and place it beside your others. This one feels different, more alive, more deliberate. You don't sleep right away. You lie awake, eyes tracing the patterns of shadow across your ceiling. Not afraid, not confused, just awake, because you're beginning to understand. The Abbey doesn't just keep secrets, it cultivates them. By the time the sun rises, your new feather is already tucked away, wrapped tight in soft linen, and slid carefully beneath the first 4. You don't even need to label it. You'll remember this one, the crow feather, given not found, dark as ink and warm when it landed in your hand. It's different from the others. Not better, not worse. Just charged with something you can't name. You think of it as a kind of answer, though you don't know to what. The morning proceeds in its usual rhythm. Bells, chanting, a minor scandal involving someone misplacing an entire sack of lentils, the kind of chaos that, by monastery standards, counts as high drama. You move through it all quietly, a little more aware of each person's movements. You find yourself watching sleeves more than faces. Who's carrying what? Who's glancing where? Who whistles when they think no one's listening? And slowly, you begin to see it patterns inside the daily blur, the hidden choreography of those who know. In the scriptorium, your copying assignment is switched. Instead of scripture, you're asked to reproduce a botanical catalogue dense, illustrated text filled with drawings of roots and leaves and obscure plants with names like snakewort and angelica. You realize within seconds this has Brother Petrus's scent all over it. Not literally, thankfully, but this is clearly his handiwork. Probably for the convent or a visiting scholar. You sharpen your quill and begin. The feather glides with a strange eagerness, as if drawing leaves suits it more than verses. You trace delicate stems, ink the tiny thorns with precision you didn't know you had. And in the margin, for the first time, you add a note of your own. Small, slanted, almost a whisper. Barred crow feather, first use. Responsive. No one told you to do this, but you feel the need to start recording your own impressions. If the ledger beneath the abbey matters, this should too. After copying, you head toward the cloister garden to fetch water for the kitchen. On your way back, you pass the infirmary window and hear low voices, Brother Hugo, and someone else, perhaps a novice. You catch a single phrase that freezes you mid-step. No, owl feathers. Only owl. Crow is for outside. They're talking about them. The feathers. And suddenly, you realize there are rules you haven't been told yet. Boundaries, categories, perhaps colors of thread aren't the only system. You finish your errand without lingering, but your thoughts circle that phrase over and over. Crow is for outside. After supper, you find Alwyn in the chapel, his head bowed, hands folded loosely on the stone balustrade. You sit beside him without speaking. The candlelight spills between you in amber stripes. They said something today, you murmur. Owl for inside. Crow for out. He doesn't look at you, but his voice is low and steady. Yes. Owl feathers belong to the abbey. The cellars, the scriptorium, the apothecary. They're internal, old, meant for work that stays. A pause. Crows. They're different. How? You ask. He turns now, just enough for you to see his eyes, serious and unreadable. Crow feathers are for messages, for movement, for the in-between. You blink. Messages. Alwyn nods once. Sometimes we send things. You want to ask who he is, but you already know. And you suddenly realize that not all the feather-wielding monks are on the same side of the abbey's silence. There are circles within circles, and you're only beginning to see the outline of the next one. That night, you open your box, unroll the crow feather again, and stare at it under the dim flicker of your candle. You imagine what it means for something to be a messaggino in words, but in intent. What if feathers are more than tools? What if they carry your thought, your focus, your willingness to offer something without guarantee? Historians still puzzle over monastic symbol systems, how orders passed ideas without leaving explicit evidence. They find marginalia, odd drawings, ink recipes buried in herbal notes, but very few mention the idea of nonverbal communication through ritualized objects. Yet here you are, looking at a feather that was never yours but came to you anyway, and wondering what you're meant to send back. You fold a piece of parchment. Small. Blank. Except for a single drawn linea spiral. You don't even know what it means. Not really. But it feels right. You tie it to the feather with plain thread, no color. You leave it on the sill of the west window before sunrise. It's gone by the first bell. You say nothing. But that day, as you pass the garden gate, you find a second crow feather stuck upright in the fence post, like a little black flag. And underneath it, pressed gently between two stones, is a slip of paper with a new drawing. A map, rough, but unmistakably pointing toward the ruins beyond the orchard. The outside, the in-between. You feel the quiet drumbeat return to your chest, the one that doesn't ask for permission, only for courage. You rise early the next morning, not because of duty, but because your feet are already moving before your thoughts catch up. The map still burns in your mind. The line of trees, the bent stone wall, the open field beyond the orchard where no monks go unless they've run out of things to confess. The ruins it marked are real. You've seen them once before, during Berry Seasona, collapsed outer structure, maybe a storage barn or an old granary, half swallowed by ivy and stories no one tells. You've never been beyond it. Not because it's forbidden, but because no one ever says anything about it at all, which is worse. The bells ring. You go through the motions. Wash, chant, eat, pretend. You copy a page of Benedict's rule with your mind entirely elsewhere. The feather in your quill hand flutters oddly as you work, not from wind, but as if reacting to your thoughts, light trembles that make your lines sharper, almost urgent. You finish the page, dry the ink, roll the scroll. You're dismissed without comment. When midday comes, you slip out under the guise of gathering herbs. No one stops you. No one even notices. You pass the orchard fence and walk the dirt path flanked by trees that hum with bees and old secrets. The map was simple: a left at the hawthorn, a right at the fallen gatepost, and then straight toward the hollowed tree that looks like a bishop's hat if you squint just right. You reach the ruins within minutes. It's quiet here. Not just absent of sound quiet in the way a held breath is quiet. The collapsed roof beams are mossy. The walls sag inward, green with lichen and time. You step carefully over a rotted threshold and into the shaded space within, and there, tucked into the crevice of a cracked foundation stone, is a bundle, cloth bound with twine, nestled like it grew there. You kneel and unfold it. Inside, 2 feathers, 1 crow, 1 owl. Between them, a folded parchment. You open it slowly. It reads, "Some messages are meant for both places. Use together, never separate." You stare at the page, unsure what to feel. You weren't expecting instructions. You certainly weren't expecting clarity. But this is more than a clue. It's an invitation to act. You return to the abbey by vespers, your robes dusted with ivy crumbs and the faint smell of old wood. No one says a word. Brother Hugo nods sleepily at you in passing, more interested in his soup than your absence. That night, in your cell, you lay out the 2 feathers side by side. The owl feather is light-colored, streaked with the softness of old snow. The crow feather is dark, almost purple, where the candlelight hits it. Together, they look like balance, like silence and speech meeting halfway. You dip both in a bit of ink and try writing. You alternate lines, first one, then the other. The owl writes smooth, steady scripture controlled, internal, exacting. The crow writes strange thing-shaft thoughts, circles, a sentence in a language you're not sure exists. And then you try them together, one in each hand. It's messy at first. The ink blots. The tips cross awkwardly. But then slowly it sinks. Your hands begin moving in rhythm, opposite and equal, as if the feathers are guiding you. You write something that isn't copying anymore. It's new. Your own words. You don't understand all of them yet, but they feel true. You stop only when the candle dies. You wake the next morning with ink on your wrists and the page stuck to your sleeve. You don't remember falling asleep. But the dream lingers, something about birds circling a tower and a book whose pages turned by wind alone. Historians rarely write about this kind of moment. They focus on rules, reforms, dates, disasters. But they miss the quiet magic the living rituals hidden in plain sight, passed between generations like wind through trees, not written in ink, but in habit, in instinct, in feathers. You tuck the owl and crow feathers into your case side by side. Not hidden, not flaunted, just where they belong. That day, when Brother Petrus asks for help in the apothecary, you go. When Sister Benedicta sends a folded note through the baker's boy, you read it. And when Alwyn passes you a vial marked with both a crescent and a spiral, you take it without question. Because now, you understand. There's no higher order. No big secret. Just layers. Some feathers stay in the abbey. Some go out. And some, like you, belong exactly in between. From the outside, your life hasn't changed. You still scrub floors, copy manuscripts, tend to the garden when asked, and answer the bells like a good novice. But underneath the visible routine, your days feel entirely different now layered. Your fingers know how to handle a quill, yes, but also how to carry a feather wrapped in intention. You speak the same prayers aloud, but your mind now dances behind the words, decoding gestures, glances, and who uses what thread to tie which feather. You're beginning to see it everywhere. The abbot's sleeves have a faint stitch of silver along the inside seam knot decoration, but a signal, maybe of rank or passage. Brother Jodocus now wears a crow feather tucked into the binding of his psalter, only half hidden. And during prayers, you catch Sister Benedicta glancing at you once, as if checking to see whether you've put the next piece together. You have. You're being prepared for something. It becomes obvious when the next assignment lands not in your lap, but in your laundry, literally. You unfold your robe after morning wash, and there it is. A small waxed packet tied with green string. Inside is a single owl feather, stripped clean along the spine and notched at its tip. Alongside it, a note in someone else's careful script. Deliver to the steward. Say nothing. No signature. No explanation. So you do exactly as told. The steward, a humorless man with a fondness for dried figs and rules carved in stone, accepts the package without blinking. You're late, he mutters, though you're not. He tucks it into a drawer of his massive desk and waves you away like a fly. You leave quietly, wondering whether the drawer is full of feathers, or if this one will be the first. Later, as you pass the cloister garden on your way back from the scriptorium, you spot Brother Petrus at his usual bench. He's not working. He's not even looking at herbs. He's watching you. And when you nod, he tilts his head nod in approval, but in something closer to resignation, as if a step has been taken that can't be undone. That evening, a new candle waits in your cell, thick, slightly fragrant, a touch of rosemary oil in the wax. No note accompanies it, just the flame, steady and ready. You know what to do. You light it. You unroll a sheet of parchment. Take out both feather sole and crow and begin writing. Not copying, not even creating. You just let your hands move. Left, right, alternating strokes. One fluid motion across the page. Words emerge. Names. Places. Images you don't remember learning. Phrases that feel older than the abbey walls. You don't question any of it. You just write until the candle burns halfway and the wax drips onto your wrist. Then you stop. You fold the parchment, wrap it in cloth, and place it inside your wooden box, not the feather box, the other one. The one with your early scribbles. The one where you keep things not meant for anyone else. Historians still argue whether monks practiced something they didn't call writing but something closer to invocation. Some believe marginalia was a form of devotional trance. Others dismiss it as artistic flourish. But if they'd seen the way your hands moved tonight, or the way your breathing shifted in time with the candle's flicker, they might ask different questions. At midnight a knock. Not loud, just once. You open the door to find no one there. Only a bundle left on the floor. Inside, a cloak, dark gray, well worn, familiar, but not yours. Folded within it, another note. Tomorrow, dusk, East Field. Wear this. You don't sleep much. You lie in the dark and listen to the steady hush of the abbey breathing in the night. Owls hoot beyond the garden. Somewhere distant, a crow answers. The next day crawls. You copy a hymn you barely register. You help in the kitchen, slicing leeks that seem to multiply with every cut. You clean candle stubs, arrange wine jars, answer 3 questions with yes and 4 with silence. And all the while, the cloak waits beneath your cot. When the sun dips low, you put it on. You leave through the same door you always use. No one stops you. At the edge of the East Field, the light is soft, golden. The air smells like dry grass and crushed thyme. Alwyn is waiting. He's not alone. Brother Petrus, Sister Benedicta, and 2 others you don't know by name, but whose faces are calm. All of them wearing the same shade of gray. None of them speaking. Alwyn hands you a bundle, a quill, a strip of linen, a small wooden vial, sealed with wax. He looks at you and finally says, "Ready?" You nod. You don't know what comes next. But you're here. You're chosen. And whatever message you're about to carry, it's already inside you. You follow them without speaking, moving as a quiet group through the tall grass that brushes your ankles like fingers asking you to stay. The sun has set, and the sky is shifting into that dusky lavender where outlines blur and everything becomes either shadow or suggestion. No torches, no lanterns. Just the dimming light and the sound of your own footsteps folding into the earth. You pass the edge of the East Field, over a broken fence post you've never noticed before. A thin trail leads up the hill, flanked by hawthorn and wild herbs. No one tells you where you're going, but that doesn't matter. Your feet know. Your hands already feel the rhythm of what's coming. When you reach the top of the slope, the group stops. Alwyn points to a low, flat stone in the center of the clearing. It looks like nothing, a forgotten foundation stone maybe, but there's something in the way everyone stands around it. Not too close, not too far, like it's a threshold rather than a thing. Petrus steps forward and unwraps a scroll from within his cloak. He places it gently on the stone and pins its corners with small river rocks. The wind doesn't even try to move it. Then, Sister Benedicta lights a single stick of something resinous, aromatic, sharp like murand, plants it upright in the dirt beside the stone. The smoke coils slowly, deliberately, as if it too knows what this is. Finally, Alwyn turns to you. Right. You kneel at the stone. Your knees press into soft moss. The quill they gave you long, smooth, unmistakably crowfits into your grip like it was made for your fingers. You don't even check the ink. You just dip and begin. At first you think about what to write, but only for a second, because then the motion takes over. Not frantic, not possessed, just inevitable. You write words you don't fully understand. Shapes and sounds and names that might be herbs or saints or places long forgotten. You feel the wind pick up around you, but it doesn't interrupt. It moves with you. The others hum quietly, a sound that isn't a chant but something older, not melodic, just human breath shaped by shared rhythm. When you finish, you sit back slowly. The scroll remains open, drying under moonlight. Petrus steps forward, reads it, and gives a single nod. Benedicta wraps the scroll back in cloth and slides it into a leather pouch. She doesn't explain where it's going. She doesn't have to. "You've done well," she says simply. You rise, feeling the cold in your knees, the weight in your shoulders, but also a lightness beneath your ribs, as if something important has been emptied out of you, willingly. Alwyn places a hand on your shoulder. "Most don't get this far," he murmurs. "Some never know they were even close." The walk back is quieter than the walk there, not solemn, just settled, like everyone has agreed to carry the silence a little longer. At the Abbey gates, you part ways without ceremony. No one hugs. No one nods. Everyone simply vanishes back into their corridors, their chores, their beds. You return to your cell, hands stained with ink, knees still tingling. You don't bother to light a candle. You know your way in the dark now. Historians still debate whether any true monastic orders ever practiced what later generations called message rites or ink ceremonies. Rituals said to mix language and intention through symbolic tools, offering prayers not to saints or even God, but to memory itself. Most dismiss them as folk invention, yet the quiet persistence of references, strange scrolls, double feathers, quills stored in wine suggests that something happened. Something no one was quite willing to name. You open your feather box, now nearly full. Each one carries the echo of a moment, a night, a question you asked without knowing the words. You slide the new quill beside the others and close the lid slowly. Then you unfold a fresh page and begin writing again. This time, for yourself. You write about the stone, the wind, the way the ink felt like breath in your hand. You write what you remember, what you don't, what you think it all might mean. And when you finish, you fold the paper 3 times and tuck it behind the beam above your cot, next to a tiny crack in the stone, where someone else, long ago, left a scrap of their own. You don't read it. You just place yours beside it. Because sometimes, the message isn't in the words. It's in the placing. The next few days pass with an odd serenity, like the abbey itself is exhaling. The bells don't feel as jarring. The prayers slip from your lips with ease, and even the porridge seems to have accepted its fate. You move through the rhythm of your monastic life, like someone finally walking in step with the unseen beat that's always been playing in the background. You're not just a novice anymore. You're not just a pair of hands at a desk or a back bent over a pail. You are part of the abbey's other story, the one not written in ledgers but in feathers, fragments, and footpaths, walked only in silence. You notice things more clearly now. The way Brother Hugo holds his quill with exactly 3 fingers when he's writing messages that aren't for the prior. The way Sister Benedicta lingers at the chapel door after Vespers, not praying, just listening. The way Petrus's herb jars are labeled with sigils, not words, and how each sigil pairs with a feather you've seen before. There's a system here, a living one, layered and fluid and quietly ancient. One evening, you find a crow feather placed outside your door. No note, no wrapping, just laid neatly across the threshold, aligned with the floorboards. You kneel to pick it up, and only then notice the faint trace of silver paint along the shaft. You turn it slowly in your fingers. It's not for writing, not for tinctures. This one is a marker, a sign. You place it beside the others in your box, no longer counting how many there are. Later that night, you visit the cellar again. The door opens easily now, as if the hinges have given up pretending to creak. Inside, the feather ledger waits. You turn to a new page, write the date, and note. Silver, marked crow. No message attached. Possibly a signal, awaiting further sign. You pause. Then you add, "Not afraid." And that, more than anything, feels like the true entry. Historians, if they ever found this room, would likely miss the point. They'd catalog the feathers, trace the inks, question the use of owl over goose. But they wouldn't understand the pauses, the waiting, the layered weight of carrying a thing without needing to explain it. This isn't about doctrine. It's about devotion to silence, to pattern, to the unseen logic of a community that speaks most clearly when it says nothing at all. You return upstairs, passing the long gallery where the older monks sometimes nap with their mouths open and their heads tilted at unfortunate angles. The hallway smells of lavender tonight. Someone's lit a new bundle. You keep walking. In your cell, the candle is already lit. You didn't leave it that way. You know what that means. You find a folded note beneath your pillow. You open it slowly. Fingers steady. It reads, "When you are ready, take one feather. Leave it in the west field. Come back without it." No signature, no instructions beyond that. You lie awake a long time, staring at the rafters, thinking about which feather to give. Not your newest, not your oldest, one that feels balanced, true, something that has served and is now ready to go. You wake before the bells. Wrap the chosen feather in clean cloth. Walk to the west field beneath a sky that hasn't quite made up its mind about dawn. The grass is wet, the stones cool. You find a spot near the edge of the field, beneath a crooked tree that's half dead, half blooming. You kneel. You place the feather gently on the ground. You say nothing. You wait a moment, then you walk away. You don't look back. You don't need to, because now you understand what the Abbey has always been teaching, not through sermons or scripture, but through these small, deliberate acts. Some messages are for others. Some are for the world. And some are only for the air, the wind, the silent moment of letting go. You return to your cell as the sky softens into the pale hush of early morning, the kind of light that doesn't rise so much as unfold. The Abbey is quiet. Everyone still sleeps, or at least pretends to. You slip inside, close the door gently behind you, and sit on the edge of your cot with your hands in your lap. There's nothing to do now, no feather to prepare, no message to carry, just stillness. The box of feathers rests beneath your bed, unchanged. But you are not unchanged. The Abbey is not unchanged. Every feather you gathered, every note you wrote, every path you followed without knowing where it led each was a thread. And now those threads have wrapped themselves around something larger than you, something older, something that doesn't need names or titles or acknowledgement to be real. The candle on your shelf burns low. You let it. You don't blow it out. You just sit in its flicker, watching shadows stretch and retreat across the stone. Your breath slows. Your shoulders drop. And with each blink, your body begins to sink deeper into that gentle space between thought and sleep. Outside, the wind rustles softly through the cloister garden. An owl calls once from the chapel eaves. Farther off, a crow answers. You lie down without folding your blanket. No need tonight. You curl into the mattress, the scratch of straw somehow familiar, almost soothing. Your mind no longer loops with questions. It drifts, light as down, and just before your eyes close for good, you imagine a feather floating from the rafters above, slow, silent, sure coming to rest beside you without a sound. The Abbey breathes, and so do you. Sweet dreams.